So welcome back to Women for Wealth. Today I want to talk to you about should you buy a house or should you rent? It is a significant financial decision that you need to make based on your particular circumstances. So what could make you buy over renting? First of all, one thing you need to look at about your particular circumstance is long-term stability. You need to be in an area that you love for at least 7 years. If you're not going to be there for 7 years or more, then you, in my opinion, shouldn't buy a house. If you know you're going to be there for at least 7 years, then yeah, you ought to probably buy a house and start building equity. So extended period of time in one area, the stability can give you lower costs compared to renting over time, especially with a fixed rate mortgage, which I do not recommend variable rate mortgages at all, period. Another thing to consider when you buy a house is your potential investment. Real estate generally appreciates over time, so buying a house can be a good investment, allowing you to build equity. However, it depends on the market in your area and where you're buying. If you buy in a good school zone, on a lake, a house with a view, in an area that's becoming gentrified, there's a lot of those areas, or a hot market. Raleigh, North Carolina, the RDU area was a hot market when we sold and moved down here to South Carolina. We were able to make a good amount of equity from that house as a result. So those are some things to think about. If you're going to make it an investment, make sure you buy in an area. Make sure you buy the house that is going to appreciate over time. Most do. But if you buy in a high crime area or an area that has a poor school system, you're probably not going to get near as much money out of your equity. Tax benefits. Homeownership comes with tax benefits. So your mortgage interest and your property taxes can be deducted from your personal taxes. I'm just going to be honest with you, this is one that I do not understand. I have a friend of mine, his name is Bill. Bill is retired, his wife is retired, his house was paid in full. She decided she wanted to be able to babysit the grandkids, she wanted to move. They sold their house that was paid in full. They bought a new house close to the grandkids. He got a mortgage on the second house. He could have paid for that second house in full, but he chose to get a mortgage. And I asked him, I was like, why would you get a mortgage? Why would you not just pay off that second house? And he said he wanted to reduce his personal tax burden by having the interest rate and the property taxes to reduce his tax burden. I thought that was a horrible idea. I told him, I said, look, Bill, if you pass, your wife doesn't have the income to pay for the mortgage. But if the house was paid in full, she would have enough money coming in retirement to be able to live. So she would have that sense of security. She wouldn't be afraid of losing her house if you were to pass. Dealing with your death and the loss of you, and having to deal with moving and finding a new place to live and selling a house. So that's something else to take into consideration. All of your decisions in life are not going to be purely financial. Look at some of those other things, such as, Bill should have considered his wife's position and giving her long-term stability, giving her peace of mind. By having a mortgage just so he could reduce his personal tax burden, he is leaving his wife in a very difficult situation if he were unfortunately to pass. So that's something to keep in mind. Personalization and control. When you own a home, you can do whatever you want to it. You can paint, you can renovate, you can do whatever you want for your personal preference, and you don't have to ask your landlord for permission. If you have a house and you got the money, you can even do an addition. You can add on more rooms, more house. You can expand your kitchen. There's lots of flexibility and control, and you can personalize your property when you own it. Stable housing costs. So I'm sure everybody that is listening to this is already a monthly budgeter. If you've watched any of my other videos, I've probably mentioned you need to have a monthly budget. You need to know what comes in, what goes out every month. You need to predict and plan that. You also need to include what you're going to invest. So here's my income. Here's what I have to pay every month. Here's how much I invest every month. And when you own a house, especially when you have a fixed rate mortgage, your costs for a house fluctuate very little. Your taxes sometimes fluctuate a little bit, but it's not that much. When you rent, the landlord actually can increase your rent prices quite a bit. I've heard of areas, especially in large cities, where rent goes up by like $300 per month per year. So that's a lot of money over time. And if you've got a budget that's fixed and you know you can afford to rent this particular apartment or condo or townhome or house or whatever you're renting, and then the landlord increases it by $300 per month, you might or might not be able to afford that. And if you can't, then you're in a situation which is a lot of stress and anxiety of, okay, I've got to find somewhere else to live, I've got to move, I've got to look at my budget again. And that's not something you want to have to deal with. But, there are reasons why you want to rent over buying a house. So let's talk about those. Why would you want to rent over buying a house? So the first thing I mentioned was long-term stability. If you're young, or if you're in an area that you don't know you're going to be there for at least 7 years, or you don't know if you're going to be changing jobs, you probably want to rent. Because when you rent, if your life situation changes, you can break a lease and you can move and you can do something else. When you own a house, for example, if you want to move to another state, you've got to decide, are you going to sell? Is the market condition right to sell? Or are you going to rent? If you're going to rent and you're moving, you're probably going to have a property management company. I at one point had 9 rentals. I have gotten out of that. I've sold them all. I have zero interest in becoming a landlord ever again. I know a lot of people are advocates of that. I tried it. It wasn't for me. I've decided that they're easier, less stressful, less anxiety-inducing ways for me to make money. Lower upfront costs. So saving for a down payment for a house and covering closing costs can be a lot of money. And it's a lot more than just, a deposit or a first month on a rent. So if you're thinking about, I don't have a large sum of money, then maybe you want to rent for a little bit longer so you can build that savings up before you decide you want to buy a house. In addition, you have to think, when you buy a house, a lot of times you want to make it yours. You want to do things to it. You want to personalize it. And you can do that with a house, but that costs money. You have to plan for it. You have to budget for it. If you have a rental, you're not going to be able to do any of those personalization, changes, updates, upgrades. You're not going to be able to go in and say, you know what? I want to paint every wall in this entire house. I want to change out the flooring. I want to get rid of carpets. Which I did both of those, by the way, when I bought this house. Every ceiling, every wall has been painted. Every floor has been refinished. I got rid of every speck of carpet out of this house. I knew when I bought it that I needed to do all that just for my own personal preference and what I like and my style, and also a little bit of germophobia. Carpet's just nasty in my opinion, and I'm not a fan of it. I've got a couple of rugs that I can actually take and clean periodically. Other than that, I've just got hardwood floors throughout the house. To me, it's cleaner, it's easier to deal with. I don't have as much allergy problems, especially having pups and dogs all around the house. Another reason to rent over buying is maintenance and repairs. Renting shifts the responsibility of maintenance and repairs to the landlord. So if you're somebody that you're handy and you don't mind fixing stuff up, or you've got the time to hire a service provider to come in and do maintenance and repairs for you, that's great. But if you don't have that, renting is a lot easier. Because when you're renting, you call up your landlord, or heck, even now, it's even better. They have online applications. So like my son had something recently with his HVAC in his condo come up where it had stopped working. He went online, he entered a service ticket for the air conditioner. They sent somebody the next week, fixed it, didn't cost him anything, no additional stress, headache. He did it online. He didn't even have to talk to anybody until the maintenance guy came. And all he had to do was let him in the door. So that was a lot easier than what he would have had to deal with if he had already purchased a home by that point. Ultimately, the decision to rent or buy depends on your individual circumstances and priorities. It's essential to look at all the factors and long-term plans, your financial stability, the local housing market conditions. You may want to consult with a financial advisor or a real estate professional to help you weigh the pros and the cons and help you make a decision based on your particular circumstances. Again, this is specific to you and your life. Do not get caught up in the cultural graduate college, get married, buy a house, have kids, white picket fence, blah, blah, blah. Do not get caught up in that. You live your own life, you drive your own car. It has to be your decision based on your particular preferences, based on your situation at the time. You're going to go through a lot of different life phases. Don't rush through them. Do them at your own pace and what's best for you at your particular situation in your particular time with your particular financial, options. If you can't afford to buy a house and you don't have 20% down payment, I would not recommend you do it. If you are not out of debt and you don't have an emergency savings account, I don't recommend you buy a house. Let me give you this stat. So I found this today. Most Americans, according to this stat, have $25,000 in credit card balance. Most credit cards are 25% APR, so that costs the average American $518.83 per month just in interest. And again, this is compound interest. $518.83 is a lot of money. Budget. Get out of commercial debt first. Commercial debt will make you poor. It will keep you from becoming wealthy. Do not have $25,000 in credit card balances at 25% APR and think you need to buy a house, because you don't. Get that taken care of first. Then, once you are out of debt, you've got your budget, you're saving, you're investing, you've got your retirement plan, you've got your emergency savings account. Then if you want to buy a house, then you start looking through this list of things and saying, okay, is it the right time for me in my situation? If it is, I hope it works out for you and I wish you all the best. If it's not, I still wish you all the best. And I think knowing that now is not the right time to buy a house and deciding to rent longer is a better decision than to buy a house and become house poor. If there's any questions or comments you have, put them down below. I will try to respond to as many of them as I can. Again, you drive your own car, you live your own life, you do what's best for you. Do not buy a house just because you think that's the next checkbox in the societal game of life.